an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering High Wizardry by Diane Duane. Chapters unnumbered. Let's go with 4, 5, and 6. In these chapters, we're going to mix together magic and computer programming. I'm very excited about it. At first, I thought it was one thing. It turned out to be another thing. Both things are pretty awesome. I am really worried about Dairine. I really am. Like, what is she doing? She's on other planets. This feels like a bad thing. Oh, God. Guys, it's an ordeal, am I right? Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Devin is here in the chat. Hi, Devin. Thank you very much for this commission. This episode, I am going to go back and forth between being very excited and very upset. So I hope you guys are all ready for it. But this starts, all right. Sometimes I have to decide whether I want to talk about things sequentially or in order of importance. And I'm going to go sequentially here for the sake of it, because I feel like the build is what's kind of important here. The previous episode, I covered the end of Deep Wizardry and the beginning of High Wizardry. So it was a weird sort of twofer episode. And in that, there was the delivery of the computer and, Nita and Kit outside talking about what they were going to do that day and the computer arriving. And we know that Dairine is really, really good with computers and just smart in general. But we don't see what happens, and we just hear her father yelling once she is revealed to be messing around with the software. Now, of course, from the outside, it just sounds like she's kind of gotten ahead of them. They don't know what they're doing. And when they look up and see their child messing around with it, it never even enters their mind that maybe she's more capable than them. And they think that she must be on her way to causing the thing to self-destruct. They are very upset. We kind of know as readers that they probably don't have anything to be upset about, but all we hear is the comedic aspect of this whole thing. And then in these chapters, we get to find out what actually happened there. And it's a very, very different situation. So, up and running. And again, these chapters aren't numbered. So I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to tell you all exactly what number chapters from here on out. But these chapters are Up and Running, Escape Key, and Search and Retrieval are the titles. It's so frustrating, guys, because not only are these not numbered, but the Kindle book is another one of those that says that it's a 3,200 page book. So I can't even be so what number chapters do you want me to read? Whoever's commissioning this, if they were to tell me specifically what to read, would have to know the chapter titles, which is just super inconvenient. But we start off with this trio because Dairine got sent to go out to the museum with Nita and Kit because she was basically being banished after messing with the computer. They take their little, they wrinkle for a wrinkle in time, a little bit of wording there. And they wind up in the city, and it says the 4 block stretch behind them between 77th and 81st Streets was commanded by the huge, graceful bulk of the American Museum of Natural History, with its marble steps and beast-carved pediment and the great bronze equestrian statue of Teddy Roosevelt looking eastward across at the park. I have to say, I don't think I have ever visited the American Museum of Natural History. I may have, But I have been to the Metropolitan Museum of Art a million times. And the American Museum of Natural History, for whatever reason, is not something that, if I was there, I particularly remember. I'm looking at the pictures of it right now, and this is not really ringing bells for me. So note to self, if I ever do visit New York again, I will have to make this a stop. And so Dairine is acting really weird. And of course, like, we know that she's taken the oath, and we know that she's like maybe a little bit too arrogant or just not wise with years yet. She has a ton of knowledge and ability, but she's not balanced. We know that about her, but we don't know the real situation. So she immediately tries to break away from them. And Nita is like, oh, fuck no, you're going to stay right near us. And Nita says, Dari, are you out of your mind? This place is full of space stuff. The new shuttle mock-up, a meteorite 10 feet long, a store with Star Wars books. Dairine stared at Nita. Well, why didn't you say so? Come on. And behind her back, Nita is explaining to Kit, listen, I know that you can deal with your sisters in a certain way and be like kind of lording things over them, and that will cause them to be intimidated and comply with you. That is not how my sister works. And I mean, in large part, I'm sure that is due to the fact that her sister is very aware that she's smarter than most people. So nobody's really going to intimidate her, right? Even somebody who has magic, you know? To Nita's mild relief, Dairine had already had admission money with her. Dad give you that? No, this is mine. Where'd you get all that? I taught a couple guys in my class to play poker last month. What? What? How old? What? She's 10? 11? She's teaching kids to play poker and then totally fleecing them. All right. I guess that's what we're doing. Let her go. Dairine. What? Just don't leave the building. Okay. Is that safe? Kit said. What, leaving her alone? She'll get into the shuttle mock-up and not come out till closing time. Good thing there's hardly anyone here. Besides, she did say she wouldn't leave. If she were going to weasel out of it, she would have just grunted or something. Oh, Nita, you sweet summer child. You just aren't ready for the loophole, which is magic. You should be, but you just don't suspect yet. And then there is this moment, and it shows that it has been highlighted 20 times. Nita considered the image of Darth Vader facing down Dairine, lightsaber in hand, and felt sorry for Vader. I like that. I feel like I'm hoping that this is an actual premonition in some way, or a foreshadowing, but I guess we'll see, won't we? They ambled down the hall to the Anigito meteorite. I'm hoping I'm saying that right. 34 tons of nickel iron slag pitted with great holes, like an irregularly melted lump of Swiss cheese. 34 tons. I'm looking, you know what? Anigito meteorite. Yes, it's a real thing. I'm so excited. I love when there are books that have things in them that are like shit that's Wikipedia-able. Wow. Yeah, this shit's huge. And you can just like go up to it and touch it. So that's pretty rad. Because like when they said that she could just go up to it and lean against it, I was surprised. I was like, they don't just have a big rope around it to make sure that people can't do that. But it is placed in such a way so that kids can actually like walk right up to it, which is pretty cool. And it is just, I mean, I'm trying to think of a size to compare it to. I'd say it's probably about the size of like a Mini Cooper. You know, it's not quite big enough to be a car for most people, but it is really something. And it says that this thing is always cool no matter how long you're in contact with it. its pleasant coolness never altered, which I find really interesting because that's something that even like with marble, you lean up against marble enough and it does start to warm up. And I wonder how true that is. I like I said, I have to visit this museum and I have to touch this meteor. So when they're touching it, Kit is able to see its history and it's sort of talking to him. When he says it came a long way, Nita says the asteroid belt 250 million miles or so. No, Kit said, farther than that. Long, long, dark times, nothing but space and the cold. And then, slowly, light growing. Faster and faster. It's dividing in toward the light till it burns, and gas and water and metal boil off one another. And before everything is gone, out into the dark again for a long, long time. It was part of a comet, Nita said. Until the comet's orbit decayed. It came in too close to the sun on one pass and shattered and came down. Kit took his hand away abruptly. It doesn't care for that memory. And now here it is. Tamed, Kit said. Resting. But it remembers when it was wild and roamed in the dark, and the sun was its only tether. I love this description of a meteor like it's a living thing. And even more, I love what comes directly after this. Nita was still for a few seconds. That sense of the earth being a small, safe house with a huge backyard through which powers both benign and terrible moved was what had first made her fall in love with astronomy. To have someone share the feeling with her so completely was amazing. She met Kit's eyes and couldn't think of anything to say. Just nodded. So, I'm going to talk about me for a second. Shocking, I know. This moment is super, super meaningful to me because I think this is what we're all looking for in life. There is a commonly held conception or even slogan, I could say, which is that we all go through life alone. Even if you're sharing it with somebody, you're really you're still alone. And I get why people think that. And I also get why they think that trying to find somebody to be with because of that aloneness is a recipe for futility and frustration and maybe disappointment. And yet, we fight so hard to be able to connect with somebody on this level, where you can just feel in your gut that they get it, whatever it may be. And for all of us, it's going to be a different thing. And I think for a lot of us, it would be kind of surprising if we realized what the thing is when we really got down to the bones of it. I think we would all maybe be a little startled to realize, oh, that's what's so important to me, that I've been wanting somebody else to see it as well. And I didn't realize in my first marriage how much I was craving that from my husband and never got it. He and I never quite saw eye to eye on things. And I'm not saying like that we disagreed with each other, although that was certainly true. What I mean is that there wasn't that sort of connection where you feel like somebody really gets who you are and what you want and what's important to you. And it may seem to be overstating it to compare that to this moment about, her bonding with Kit about space, but they're very young. And it makes sense for this to be something that's sort of, for the moment, outside of themselves and kind of impersonal. And I, like I said, was craving that so much in my first marriage that, and did not know that was what I was craving, and was constantly trying to force it to happen and getting heartbroken over and over again when it just didn't. And when he seemed to show no interest in it happening either. Like, it wasn't like he was trying to connect with me back and we were just sort of missing what it was with each other. It was that he didn't seem to want to connect at all. Like, he didn't get that that was missing for me, and it was not a priority for him. And when that's the case, it's just even harder. The first time that I felt that feeling of being completely on the same exact wavelength as somebody else was at Christmas several years ago. I was with Owen. It wasn't Christmas Day. It was like a couple weekends before. We threw a Christmas party at our house with our friends. And we put in a lot of work, tons of decorations, presents for everybody. I did so much cooking. It took me like a week to get everything ready. And there was a moment, and I'm getting teared up just thinking about it, where he and I were sitting next to each other on the love seat. And the love seat has a view of the whole living room and kitchen area. And we were watching everybody drinking and opening presents and sitting around joking with each other, getting excited about what they were opening. Some of them were watching whatever Christmas movie he had on the TV. And there was this profound sense of, oh, here we are, that I think he and I have both been craving since we were kids, when things in our families started to go very wrong. I won't even say started to for him. They'd been wrong, but I don't think he was quite old enough to realize what he was experiencing wasn't normal until a certain age. And I was looking around with this sense of perfect happiness, that everybody was having such a good time. Everybody here was getting along and liking each other. Everybody was so excited about opening gifts. It was just this excellent moment. And I turned and looked at Owen, and he was looking at everybody with the exact same expression of utter contentment. And he turned and looked at me, and we made eye contact, and he just gave me this smile of such satisfaction. And he took my hand and just squeezed it. And it was just like in this one moment that we both totally knew what the other was feeling, and we were also feeling it. And it was just like, little moments like that in life that just carry you through sometimes, something that's just a real flicker and a singular instant, and you have to save it and like put it somewhere and take it out occasionally and just be like, yep, that's really, really unusual and really special. And that happened. So having that with somebody is really, really rare. It's so rare. Some people may never, ever get it. And it takes a certain amount of courage as well, depending on what it is, because you have to be willing to let somebody see how important it is to you. And we don't always want to do that because it is such a sacred thing that we don't even let ourselves realize is that important. That making ourselves vulnerable and risking not having it reciprocated is terrifying. And I really love in this moment with the two of them that she doesn't know what to say, and so she doesn't say anything, because that was exactly how it was between the two of us. We just looked at each other and he squeezed my hand. We didn't speak because that would have really diminished it. Sometimes words are useless, So anyway, this just reminded me of that so much. And I really love that they have this sort of connection, and it's not a connection that comes from them each realizing that they have magic, which it would be very easy for that to be the thing because nobody else knows about it, because it's so unusual. But in fact, they are connecting over something that many human beings can relate to and understand. but it's just a very specific type of understanding. And I can see that this means something for the two of them. That, you know, it may be romantic, it may not be. But in any case, it feels very significant to me. So anyway, Devin's writing, I'm not crying, you're crying. I'm totally crying. It's a mess. I cried reading these books a lot is all I'm saying, okay? So Nita is like kind of glad that Dairine is sort of keeping out of their way most of the time. It's not like she's not around. She doesn't just go and disappear the way that Nita had predicted. But they don't see her that much. She just kind of comes around. At one point, there's like a sky show. And after that, she goes off to the planetarium to buy some more books. And as they are like winding down, she comes up to Nita and Kit, and she says something because they're using the scales that like sort of figure out how much you would weigh on each planet because of their different gravities. And she says something to Nita about how Nita's putting on weight up front. And this is because Nita has gone and gotten her first bra because her breasts are starting to develop. And she is very self-conscious about it. And the fact that Dairine is just saying this to her, Nita has a moment of like really high temper and has to sort of calm herself down. I am not going to let her get to me. And as they're talking about this, Dairine's like, all right, well, I'm going to the bathroom. And Kit tells Nita, you should have, like, there's this moment where she came up to you and said that you would have had to wash your head out with soap because you should have heard the way your mind went haywire and what you were like thinking. What was that even about? And Nita says something about how I'm growing. And he says, you don't look any taller. And she says, Kit. And then he realizes, and he looks at her chest and goes, oh, I guess I didn't notice. Oh, thank heaven, Nita thought. And immediately after that, he didn't notice? I love this. This is so accurate. You want people to like be aware of it, but not too aware of it. And where that line is fluctuates constantly, so you're never going to be happy. And it's just, you know, it's a really tough thing to go through because, you know, boys, they just shoot upwards. They start to get maybe some facial hair and acne and stuff. But when boys start to grow, they are not sexualized the way that girls are when they're growing. And that is not to say that young boys aren't taken advantage of by adults sexually. That is absolutely way more true than we ever like to talk about. Because when young boys are sexualized by older women, it's considered some sort of triumph for them because we're disgusting. But with young girls, there's a real feeling of danger to it that I don't know boys ever really understand. That you are feeling excited about the changes that are happening, but you also start to notice that you're being looked at differently and you're being treated differently. And you start to realize that having this body is a bit of a liability. And that's something that you have to like compensate for. And it's really a bummer. I don't feel like she's quite gotten there in her head yet, but I think she will, unfortunately, because we all do. So when she says that, you know, Dairine is just constantly teasing her about it, he says maybe she's jealous. And when she laughs at this, he's like, dude, are you hearing yourself? Dairine has been obsessed with magic from a tiny kid. You said so yourself. But here you roll up, the oldest, and, you know, you're able to do all this stuff that she has only read about. And Nita is like, I'm not sure that she has anything to be jealous of, because I think she might be able to do some of this herself. She went over my manual, and he's like, well, so there you are. If she can't have the magic, she's going to twist you around whatever other way she can. I hate to say this, Neats, but she's a real brat. That agreed too well with the thoughts Nita had been having, but had rejected. Well, so this is when it's announced that the museum is going to be closing, and they need to get out of there. So Nita goes and looks for Dairine at the ladies' room to let her know it's time to leave. And she gets down there, and it is much cooler, is the first thing that she notices. Cold enough that she starts to be like, okay, I would like to have a jacket, actually. This would be great. She went back the way she had come in, and it was not only cold down here, there was a draft. She grabbed the handle of the door and pulled. It resisted her slightly, and there was a faint whoo noise, air sliding through the door crack as she tugged. Air blew hard past her and ruffled her hair into her eyes. Bitter cold smote the front of her, and in it the humidity in the air condensed out instantly, whipping past Nita through the sucking air as stinging, dust-fine snow. So yeah, it turns out that Dairine has used a spell to create a portal to fucking Mars in the bathroom at the museum. Surprise, bitches! Yeah, if you had told me she was going to get up to some shit, this is certainly not what I was going to be expecting. And then when we go to the next chapter, titled Escape Key, we find out how this happened. Well, scratch that. We find out some of what happened. It's not until later in the third chapter, Search and Retrieval, that we really find out how. So, Dairine wakes up the next morning after having taken the oath and is feeling a sense of real letdown, because she was thinking that, you know, taking this oath, she'd be able to do all kinds of things. And she's just living her old ordinary life. And it's just very anticlimactic. But then the computer is delivered. And so that's some excitement that she is able to sort of latch onto. And it says, Dairine was good with computers. It was just one more kind of knowledge, good for using to keep people and the world off your back. And computers were really surprisingly easy to work with once you got it through your head that they were utterly stupid things, unable to do anything you didn't tell them how to do in a language they understood. In her few months' work with the apples at school, Dairine had become an accomplished hacker. The computer, tireless listener, absolutely obedient to orders, and endlessly forgiving of mistakes, was the perfect companion. They worked well together. Even her teachers had noticed that the machines behaved better around Dairine than around anyone else. She never noticed this herself, having taken it for granted. So this is a really interesting setup here, where I'm thinking, and I may still be right, who knows, that this ability is manifesting as a technological advantage. You know, we have Kit, who is able to deal with machinery and like man-made objects and inert objects. We have Nita, who can, you know, talk to animals and deals with living things, trees and plants. So it makes sense that Dairine, we have to find another aspect to this. And having it be something structured with a lot of logic that is man-made but also like programmable and is really distinctively emotionless. That makes sense for Dairine. A lot of sense, actually. So she's over here as her parents are still arguing about how to do anything with this computer. She's over here attaching all of the cables that she needs to plug in that shit in, turning it on. And she notices, as she turns it on, that the Apple logo, it's still the normal one. It's the striped apple, is what she calls it, which I forgot that it used to look that way. But it doesn't have a bite out of it. And she's like, momentarily like, that's weird. That's not really what that's supposed to look like. But then she thinks maybe they changed the logo. Maybe the software is pirated or there's something wrong with it. And when she first starts to use the computer, it asks for a password. And it's like the whole way this computer is functioning is unfamiliar to her. Somebody who feels very, very familiar with Apple computers. So this is really like tripping her up a little bit, and she has to make some guesses. So it asked for the password, and she squinted at the screen, then smiled and typed in a private joke, the code name that a certain untrained farm boy used in his fighter run on the Death Star, a name that suited Dairine since she had inherited her mother's red hair. Red 5, she typed, and hit the carriage return. Hit the carriage return. It's moments like that where, you know, as antiquated as this all obviously is, with her actually typing commands this way, it's not until moments like that I'm like, wow, okay, yeah, the context of this, though, is definitely antique as well. So it shows all of these files, and I love that they're all like, you know, like hundreds or thousands of kilobytes, and this is considered huge. Like, again, it's just things like this, you know. And there's assist, change, copy, copy.com, copy.dat, go.com, go.dat, hide.com, manual.com, manual.dat, mbasic.com, menu.com, seek.com, support.com, support.dat. So she's looking at this and it's just like, this is in total way more memory than this computer is actually supposed to have. This doesn't make any sense. But she types copy because her instinct, and this is again, another like, I don't think I used computers enough this early on to know that this had been a thing, but apparently you would make a copy of the entire hard drive before you started anything. That way, if you went back, you could just like have the old copy if something got fucked up, which makes sense. It's just, you know, it's such a huge amount of effort and such a big step to take to just have a whole copy of everything. But it asks if she's sure that she wants to do this, and then it says copy successfully completed, and a second computer appears. And she's like, wait, what? So this is the first moment where I'm really like, oh shit, there's just magic on this computer. I just like, I knew there was something weird going on, but it didn't occur to me that this was how she was accessing any magic. Like, that was just not part of my suspicion list, you know? So, meanwhile, her parents are still fucking arguing, don't notice that a whole other computer has appeared, and she's given a bunch of options for how to hide it. And it says, hide from copy utility, and that is hide in real space, invisibility option, hide in real space, size reduction, hide in other space, retrievable pocket, discard in other space, non-retrievable pocket, timed storage, coordinate specific calculation, claudication, or F, exit to main menu. Password for retrieval, red 5. And this whole thing is shrunk down and put in a little pocket that she can carry it with her to the museum in. A time pocket, or a space pocket, other space. So that is how she uses the computer to open this portal. It appears in her lap when she just whispers red 5, because they ask her if that should be, how does it? Choose input option, verbal or keyboard. Verbal, she typed very fast. So when she goes and sits by herself and just says red 5, the computer just appears. And it's apparently like running without power, and she can't figure that out. But she's just kind of like, I'm not going to question this too hard because I really want to use this fucking thing. And this is when she is able to open this fucking portal. And there's a moment that I found really interesting. So, active or passive mode. And I'm like, what does that mean? And she chooses active. And it is saying, there's a whole list of utility options that come up. Outside assistance, routine, support. Outside assistance, emergency, assist. Other programming, M basic. 6, exit to system. Transit utility. And she chooses verbal. And all of a sudden, the computer talks to her and says, inside solar system or outside solar system? The computer said very quietly, but so suddenly that Dairine almost dropped it. Inside, she said, and swallowed. Planet? Mars, Dairine said. Coordinates? Default, she said, on a hunch. Default coordinates confirmed. Last recorded transit. Atmosphere? Atmosphere? Yes. Parameters? 15% oxygen, 80% nitrogen, 5% carbon dioxide. She just fucking knows this, guys. If you asked me what our atmosphere was made up of, I'd just be like, air. Mixed proportions, approximate Terran sea level parameters. Default to those? Yes. Estimated time in transit? She thought. 1 hour. Data complete, said the computer. Ready to transit. Command, run. Run, Dairine said. And everything slewed sideways and upside down. Or, no, the world stayed the same. But Dairine's frame of reference suddenly became huger than the whole Earth and the space that contained it, so that her planet seemed only one moving, whirling point, plunging along its path through a terrible complexity of forces, among which gravity was a puny local thing and not to be regarded. I love how that's phrased. A puny local thing and not to be regarded. That is going to be a burn that I just put in my pocket and take out for people that I find particularly small and insignificant. I'm going to call them puny local things not to be regarded. And it will be absolutely devastating, at least to me. They might not even understand, but it's fine. So she manages to make it to Mars, but it fucking costs her. This is not easy magic where you just step through and, oh, here I am. This shit rips her up a little bit inside. I'm going to read this. Lines and sparks and traces of white fire seemed to tear through her head from her eyes to the back of her skull. They pinned her to the rolling earth like a feebly fluttering moth to a card. Yikes. And she finally gets to her feet and has to wait a minute for her vision to clear up. And then she looks around and she realizes that she is indeed on Mars and she's looking at one of Mars's moons. And she asks this computer, at first she's just like, what is that? And the computer replies, rephrase for precision. And she's like, okay, the mountain. What is it? Identify. And it tells her Olympus Mons. How did I get up there? Or how do I get up there? Reference short transit utilities. She did. 5 minutes later, she stood in a place where the wind no longer sang, for it was too thin to do so, where carbon dioxide lay frozen on the rust-red stones, and the fringes of her protective shell of air shed a constant snow of dry ice and water vapor as she moved, a place from which she could see the curvature of the planet. Dairine stood 12 miles high atop Olympus Mons on the ridge of its great crater, into which Central Park could have been dropped entire, and looked out over the curve of the red world at what no non-wizardly child of Earth had seen with her or his own eyes before. The asteroid belt rising like a chain of scattered stars, and beyond it the tiniest possible disk, remote but clear. So she notices a beacon of some kind that's it's lit, and it is down in the crater. And she asks the computer to bring her down there, and it does. And she asks for it to translate what it says. And unfortunately, a lot of this is not translatable, even to this magic. So it's fills in everything that it can't translate with the word untranslatable. So it says, first, untranslatable climbing expedition, ascent of untranslatable proper name from date uncertain to date uncertain. We were here. Signed, untranslatable proper name, untranslatable proper name, untranslatable proper name. People, Dairine whispered. Affirmative. She looked up at the stars in the hard violet sky. I want to go where they came from. Reference transit utility. Excuse me, Dairine. Did you just wish to go to a planet covered in alien life forms that you don't know anything about? I feel like this is a bad decision, girl. But it's obvious that she's like, I was going to say she's just curious, but then she says, Darth Vader, look out, here I come. So I'm realizing, like, she's not just curious. She's genuinely like, I am going to go and I'm going to find somebody to fight and I'm going to beat them and this is going to be awesome. And I'm just like, oh my God, you're really smart and also such an idiot. You are a child. And I've never felt more aware of it in these books than right now. Meanwhile, Nita is over here flipping out because her sister is missing. She does not know, she isn't going to just walk through there to try and get her back. Like, that's not going to do it. And Kit says, do you know how much power it takes to open a gateway like that and leave it open? Usually it's all we can do to keep one open long enough to jump through it. And Nita's like, well, the gates at Grand Central and World Trade are open all the time. And he's like, yeah, and those each took 100 of wizards working together to open them. Like, she may be a brat, but goddamn. And they look in her manual, and there she is, Dairine Callahan, novice rating, on ordeal, no calls. That sucks. Ordeal. Yeah, this isn't a good sign. And I found this really interesting because Nita, considers only briefly not telling her parents what's going on, but she realizes that that is not an option for her. She has promised herself that she wouldn't lie to them anymore. They know she's a wizard. They probably have been low-key waiting for something like this to develop with Dairine. It's possible. They know that. And she has to be honest with them about everything that's going on. However, I would like to point out how beautiful this moment is. We'd better call Tom and Carl. They'll want all the details. Wow! We're going to involve adults. What a novel fucking idea. We're going to get some people with more experience than us in this area, and we are going to get their help. That is very refreshing. I'm staring right now, deadpan at the screen, for those of you who are not here to see me, because you all probably remember Rashawn being very upset at the fact that there don't seem to be any fucking adults around with any level of competence in Harry Potter. And those that are around seem to either not believe or whatever. So I really, really like the fact that not only do they get in touch with these two, but they make sure to bring them to talk to their parents on their behalf, because getting reassurances from these kids is not going to help her parents feel more secure in what's happening. Talking to a fellow adult, that is what will do the job. And I love this part as well. Nita understood from her studies that normally a wizard was allowed to get as old as possible before being offered the oath. The powers, her manual said, wanted every wizard who could to acquire the security and experience that a normal childhood provides. But sometimes, when problems of an unusual nature came up, the powers would offer the oath early, because the younger children, not knowing or caring what was impossible, had more wizardry available to them. Now, that is, have you all experienced the shrinking of your imagination that I have as I've gotten older? I am still, compared to many people my age, wildly imaginative. I mean, you all have heard the crazy jaunts that I go on during my podcasts being like, what if this happened? And I just create this fucking crazy thing. And so in that respect, I'm not trying to act like it's been taken from me. But the imagination that I had as a child and the willingness to just believe or be okay with things that were just, outside of reality is so different. And I never felt as old as I did about 3 or 4 weeks ago, right before I took my vacation. Owen got sick before I got sick. And he put on all of these classic Looney Tunes from Amazon Prime. And I was watching them and just constantly having the adult response to things, which, by the way, is no fun at all. In which you'd be like, that wouldn't fit in that spot. You couldn't cut a hole there. That wouldn't lead this way. You can't do this and then have that happen. Just it's a fucking cartoon, Natasha. Jesus. And I would have to, every single time I had one of these thoughts, I would have to stop and be like, holy shit, it's a fucking cartoon. Stop. But every time something like that happened, my instinctual response was, that's not real. Oh my God. It's just, you completely undermine any amount of fun. And I'm over here watching movies in which guys are headshotting other dudes every single time they take a shot. But that level of unreality where someone's dealing out death in a violent way on the streets of a city, I'm fine with that. Somebody who can just cut a hole in a wall and walk into another place, all of a sudden I'm just like, well, that doesn't seem very realistic. It's just such a shame to me that we wind up here as adults, that all of the lightness and ability to just believe and accept the most unbelievable things is taken from us because the world has robbed us of joy and has forced us to see everything in this one way. And you have to a degree, see things that way to grow up. But it's like once you pass that point, you can't go back again quite the way you wish you could, where it's a wholehearted belief and acceptance. You have to work toward believing and accepting. And it used to be effortless. And it's just sad, Devin says, something I never thought about, but holy shit, you're right. And it always seems like I'm on the hunt for new stories, books, games, etc. to stoke the flames of my imagination, to have new ideas. And this is the thing. If we let ourselves just sit with an idea and really extrapolate from there and go in wild directions and just really let ourselves go nuts, we could probably come up with some rad stuff. But our imaginations are reframed to be in the context of things that we have already experienced. As kids, we don't have life experience to hold us back. We haven't been disabused of any of our ideas yet. There haven't been a bunch of disappointments or things that haven't worked out or experiments that failed or accidents or whatever. We don't have that under our belts yet. So as far as we know, that would work. Sure. Go ahead. I bet it would, and it's a shame that filters in through and makes it so that we just don't see the fun in anything a lot of times, unless we really focus on, okay, I'm going to find the fun. And it's just kind of a bummer. So anyway, Nita sees that if they are calling on her sister this early, that the problem that the powers have for her sister to deal with is probably really fucking bad. It's probably fatal, potentially. And she immediately goes to the phone and she calls her house because she's going to try and explain as best she can to her parents what happened. But Dairine answers. And this is how the last scene ended with Dairine. She's like, well, it's going to take a while for me to go to this other place, so I'd better create another copy. but it's a little bit more of a complex one. And I'm like, you bitch, you're making a copy of yourself. And I really did wonder how this was going to work. As it turns out, it works well enough to fool people who don't know Dairine. It would be like people would see her and be like, oh yeah, that's a person. But because she and her parents know Dairine so well, they're immediately able to pick on some weird behavioral stuff that, like, that just does not seem like her. So Nita is like, are you all right? Where are you? And Dairine's like, yeah, I'm here. I'm fine. What are you talking about? And Nita is like, how did you get back? How did you get out? You left the gate open. Do you know what could have happened? And Dairine just says, Nita, you're babbling. Just go home. I'll see you later. And she hung up. And I'm myself sitting there like, just go home. Go. But she answered the phone at Nita's house, unless that's magic and she's not actually home. And for a second I thought, maybe Dairine made a copy just to answer the phone because she knew that Nita would call home. So maybe it's like a computer program, not actually like a physical person, that makes it seem like Dairine is safe at home. And, you know, but pretty quickly I realized that that was not the case. And I like the fact that go home rather than come home is the thing that catches Nita's attention. She's like, that doesn't, why would she phrase it like that? That doesn't seem right. And she tells Kit, it didn't sound like her. She sounded weird. And Kit's like, yeah, I mean, it says she's on an ordeal. So her just being at home to answer the phone doesn't really feel right. So something's obviously wrong. So they go to see Tom and Carl. And I love, you know, as usual, the description of their house. And we get a little bit of a peek at how many, it says few worlds have more than 30 or 40 seniors. At this point in Kit's and Nita's practice, Earth had 24. 6 scattered through Asia, 1 in Australia, 1 for the whales in the Atlantic Ocean, 3 in Europe, 4 in Africa, and 9 in the Americas, 5 in Central and South America, and 4 in the North. Of these, 1 lived in Santa Cruz, 1 lived in Oklahoma City, and the other 2 lived together a few miles away from Nita's home in Nassau County. So, you know, we get the description of their home, which is very nice and just a little offbeat, but just seems like, you know, a little quirky, but nothing suspicious. And all of their pets, the dogs, Annie and Monty, and they explain what happened. And it says, when they came to the part about the World Gate, Carl got up to go for his supervisory manual, and Tom looked at Kit with concern. And he asks Kit, because Kit closes that gateway, but Kit had said to Nina at the time that it was a really hard one. It was just tough to handle. And Tom asks Carl to get Kit some aspirin. Kit specifically says, I'm allergic to aspirin, so Tylenol. And I'm like, is that going to come up later? Because it's a weird detail to put in there for no reason. And then he says, how did you manage to disalign a patent gateway all by yourself? And then, but wait a minute, are you taller than you were? 2 inches. That would explain it then. It's a hormonal surge. Tom cleared his throat and looked at Nita. You too, huh? Hormones? Yes, unfortunately. Well, your wizardry will be a little bit more accessible to you for a while than it has been since you got started. Just be careful not to overextend yourself. It's easy to overreach your strength just now. That's very interesting. The idea that, like, some kids are going to be really good at magic just because they don't know that certain things are impossible. And then there are other kids that are going through a hormone surge that's going to allow them to access their power more easily, which is just wondering why, you know? And when Nita says, I don't get how she could have done this, she doesn't even have a manual. And Tom says, have you gotten a computer recently? Just this morning. Tom and Carl looked at each other. I thought only advisory levels and above were supposed to get the software version of the manual just yet, Carl said. So this is when I'm like, oh, it's the manual. Because what I thought was that she had figured out, or not really even figured out, but simply that her magic was manifesting as a computer console, because that is something that her mind really understands, and that it was just the way her magic chose to present itself to her. And it turns out, I mean, that might be part of it for sure, but they have been beta testing a software version of the manual. I love this so much, you guys. What a genius idea, I swear to God. And he says the way you normally do spells, drawing diagrams and learning the speech and everything, it takes a lot of practice. You have to do all these diagrams. And you have to learn how to speak the speech, but then you also have to learn to think in it. Now that technology has proceeded far enough on this planet for computers to be fairly widespread, the Powers have been working with the senior wizards to develop computer-supported wizards' manuals. The software draws the necessary diagrams internally, the way a calculator does addition, for example. You get the solution without seeing how it's worked out. The computer also synthesizes the speech, though, of course, there are tutorials in the language as you go along. And Carl is like, and there's pluses and minuses to this. The speech is really specific. So if you need things to go exactly a certain way, the speech is going to enable you to do that in a way that maybe computers aren't able to. However, if you are an experienced wizard and you already know the theory and the way to cast it in speech, using a computer is going to be a huge time saver for you, and you don't really need to worry about learning those principles and basics. And then Tom fucking comes in with this fucking Tom, maybe just don't, guy. But at the same time, he kind of has to. He says, you know how many children go missing in this country every year? It's not all kidnappings and runaways. Some of those kids are out on their ordeals. And because they don't have time to become good with speech, they get in trouble with the lone power that they can't get out of, and they never come back. Providing them with the wizard software may save some of their lives. Meantime, and Carl's like, yeah, meantime, I need to look at the software. I need to see which version she has. I need to be able to talk to her. And I need to make sure that if she lights out in the middle of nowhere on ordeal without meaning the oath she took, she is going to be in trouble up to her neck. So they go back with these two to Nita's parents and explain what's going on. And they go through the history on the computer and are able to put together what happened. And this is what leads to them knowing that the Dairine that's in the house is a copy. And also the computer that is sitting there is a copy. She has the real computer with her. So he casts this spell so that only originals of everything can be in the room, and the copy of the computer disappears. And so does the other copy of Dairine. Meanwhile, Pikachu, did you hear me? Machu Picchu, aka Peach, is insisting on coming with them because she says she is needed. So I'll be interested to see how Pichu contributes to this whole thing. And also, I really love that there is that history so that they can look at it and find out exactly what it was she did. That helps a lot, obviously. And when he first opens Carl, the software, the oath is on the front of the computer. And I found this so telling. Dairine took that, her father said at last. So did we, Daddy, Nita said. Yes, but... He sat down on the edge of the desk, staring at the screen. Dairine isn't quite like you two. Yeah, he knows his daughter. He's like, yo, I believe that you and Kit have altruistic reasons. I don't feel that coming from your sister, though. So if she said these words, I just gotta believe that's not gonna go the way it went for y'all. And I really love that he knows her well enough to be able to tell something like that. You know, it's just little details like that. And they find out also at this point that the magic that Nita and her sister have comes from their father's side, and that his grandfather was a really well-known wizard who was also the mayor of New York, I think he says. The first mayor of New York, one of the best to grace this continent. And her dad is like, oh my God, are you serious? I thought that I saw him disappear one time, and then later I just told myself I imagined it. And then he asks, well, why Dairine? And Carl says she's needed somewhere. The powers value the status quo too highly to violate it without need. It's what we're defending, after all. Somewhere out there is a life or death problem to which only Dairine is the answer. I am dying to know what that's like. I can't wait to figure out what the fuck that is. So this is the moment where Dairine's copy gets excised from the house. And then they talk about entropy, and that Dairine is not careful enough to really be like good with whatever it is they're describing. And Tom says, we're going to track her and make sure she has help, but I think Nita will have to go. And Kit offers to come as well, and they're like, Kit, your parents don't know you're a wizard. You're not going to be able to explain being gone for so long. And Kit's like, listen, it's time I told them. Your parents handled it fairly well. I need to give my parents the benefit of the doubt. But he's obviously very concerned about it. Like, because you never know. You know, this is just such a wild thing to tell people. And anything in particular about Star Wars she's interested in? Darth Vader, Kit said. She wants to beat him up. Tom groaned and ran one hand through his hair. No matter what the reason, he said, if she goes looking for darkness, she'll find it. But Darth Vader's not real. Tom glanced at her. Not here. Be glad. Yeah, that's interesting. And so, this is when Pichu says that she's going to be accompanying Nita and Kit to wherever they wind up going. What do they need her for? Tom asked Pichu. She closed her eyes. Reconfiguration, she said, and opened her eyes again, looking surly. Well, what are you staring at? I can't tell you more than I know. Are we going? Oh, Peach. Even saints have to start somewhere, and it's always been the children who have saved the universe from the previous generation and remade the universe in their own image. And the three of them, in her bedroom, Nita grabbed her manual, bit her lip, said 3 words, and vanished. So, that is the end of that chapter. So this is a really great setup. I'm just super, super interested in finding out what happens. And I like Dairine a lot, but I also just get so frustrated with her, you know? So I'm really interested to see what's happening here. All right, I'm going to wrap. Thank you so much, Devin, for commissioning this. It was really fun. Thank you for being here also. And I hope that everybody listening is enjoying the coverage. If you are interested in commissioning one as well, you can go to unspoiledpodcast.com/shop, I think is the easiest way. And I'm looking forward to getting more into this. So hopefully I'll hear from y'all soon. And until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.